Four different nations, four completely different complaints. One tournament that was supposed to be the greatest football celebration in human history. And right now, at various levels of intensity, Iran, Egypt, Paraguay, and Brazil have all found themselves in direct conflict with FIFA over decisions made during this World Cup that they believe were wrong, unfair, or simply impossible to accept. These aren't rumors. These aren't social media grievances from anonymous accounts. These are formal complaints, reversed policies, courtroom hearings, and live television meltdowns. And they all happen within the first 2 weeks of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So what exactly is going on? And what does it tell us about a tournament that keeps generating controversy faster than the goals can keep up? Let's start with the story that set the tone before a single ball was kicked. Iran's journey to this World Cup is unlike anything any team has ever experienced at football's biggest stage. Their base camp was moved from Arizona to Tijuana, Mexico before the tournament began. Some of their coaching and administrative staff were denied entry into the United States entirely. Their ticket allocation was revoked just days before the opening match, leaving fans who had already booked flights and hotels unable to attend. And then came the moment that crystallized everything. Iran's Football Federation lodged an official complaint with FIFA after their request to travel to Los Angeles 2 days before their group stage match against Belgium was denied. FIFA's own regulations state that each team shall travel from its base camp to the match venue 1 day before match day, and in exceptional cases, on the day before that. Iran argued that the restrictions being applied to them went beyond what any other team at the tournament was dealing with. The Iranian Federation said that despite having submitted its preparation schedule for the tournament well in advance, the national team had once again encountered restrictions imposed by the organizers, affecting the implementation of its technical staff's plans. That phrase, once again, tells you everything about how this team feels about the experience of competing at a tournament where one of the host nations has complicated their every move. Here's where things get interesting. One of Iran's players had to personally visit the U.S. consulate in Tijuana to obtain a new visa after his original documentation expired after their first match. Think about what that means in practice. A professional footballer preparing for a World Cup group stage campaign, making a separate trip to a consulate in a foreign city to sort out paperwork, while his teammates are training and recovering. The logistics of simply getting permission to play football in this tournament became a full-time operation for Iran's management. Meanwhile, in the stands, Iranian fans flooded the stadium with a pre-revolutionary flag that FIFA had officially banned, with supporters defying security screenings that had been specifically cranked up ahead of the match to keep the symbol out. A court had already upheld FIFA's ban on the flag before the tournament began, ruling that the restriction was reasonable, despite free speech arguments. But the fans brought the flags in anyway, and security couldn't stop them. The court ruling had noted that there could be harm to the thousands of staff members who had to deal with safety protocols and described changing a long-standing stadium protocol for a massive event in a period of hours as a tremendous burden. But in the stands, the flags were everywhere. The legal battle was settled, the fans ignored the outcome, and FIFA was left managing a situation inside its own stadiums that no rulebook had fully prepared them for. Iran's story is one of logistics, documentation, and identity. But Egypt's confrontation with FIFA was different. It was quieter, more specific, and in its own way, even more revealing about how this governing body operates. But that's only part of the story. Egypt arrived at the 2026 World Cup having done something remarkable. They qualified for their first World Cup since 1990, 36 years of waiting, and they came with a kit that carried the weight of their footballing history, specifically the 7 stars above their national crest, each one representing their 7 record Africa Cup of Nations titles. 7 continental championships, the most in African football history, on the shirt, above the badge, for everyone in the world to see.
FIFA instructed Egypt to remove the 7 stars from their kit before their opening group stage match, arguing that the symbols violated equipment regulations. FIFA's rules bar political, religious, or personal messages or slogans on team kit. Egypt's Football Federation pushed back, arguing that stars representing continental championship titles are sporting symbols, not political messages. They lost the argument. The ruling meant Egypt would take to the field in a modified version of their jersey, leaving one of the most recognizable symbols of their footballing history absent from the world's biggest stage. But that wasn't the end of Egypt's friction with the tournament organizers. FIFA also instructed Egypt to change the color of their squad numbers from gold to white in order to improve color differentiation and enhance visibility during television broadcasts. Two separate kit interventions before the tournament had even properly begun. And then came the scheduling detail that pushed things into genuinely unprecedented territory. Egypt were drawn in a group alongside Iran, Belgium, and New Zealand. When the schedule was released, it emerged that the Egypt versus Iran match had been designated the Pride match by Seattle's organizing committee, a game selected to celebrate the LGBTQ+ community during Pride Month. Both Egypt and Iran have laws against homosexuality, some of which carry severe penalties. The Egyptian Football Association sent a formal letter to FIFA's Secretary General rejecting in absolute terms any connection between their match and the Pride match designation. Iran announced it was planning to appeal the decision. And FIFA, caught between the demands of one of its host city organizing committees and the objections of two competing nations, found itself navigating a situation with no clean exit. This matters because it illustrates something about the complexity of hosting a tournament of this scale across three countries with different cultures, different priorities, and different organizing committees. What works as a celebration in Seattle isn't necessarily something that competing nations from other parts of the world will accept without protest. FIFA created the framework. FIFA selected the host cities, and FIFA is the one managing the fallout when those frameworks collide with the realities of international football. Now let's get to Paraguay, because their story is the one that ignited the loudest public reaction of all four. FIFA introduced a new rule for the 2026 World Cup following a special meeting of the International Football Board in April, allowing players to be shown a red card for covering their mouth during confrontational exchanges with opponents. The rule was introduced in response to an incident where a player used a gesture to conceal what appeared to be racist language directed at a prominent star during a Champions League match earlier in the year. During Paraguay's victory over Turkey, their Newcastle United midfielder became the first player in World Cup history to be sent off under the new rule, with VAR reviewing the incident before the red card was confirmed. He was suspended for their next match, a key player, gone, under a rule being applied for the very first time at a World Cup. Paraguay accepted it. They played on, they won the match. And then, 4 days later, England's midfielder was caught on camera covering his mouth while exchanging words with a Ghanaian forward during England's goalless draw with Ghana, in a gesture that immediately recalled what had happened to Paraguay's player days earlier. No red card, no VAR review, nothing. The Paraguayan Football Association submitted a formal complaint to FIFA, arguing that the governing body had failed to apply the rule consistently across all competing nations. In the document sent to FIFA, Paraguay cited numerous instances where the England players' behavior appeared to violate the same rules that had been applied against their own player, with a source close to the federation stating plainly that the rules of the game must be applied fairly to all teams, otherwise all regulations will completely lose their legitimacy. FIFA maintained its position that the England player escaped punishment because his interaction was not deemed confrontational in nature, with reports indicating the officials considered the exchange to be a relaxed conversation with no apparent aggression. Paraguay's federation rejected that reasoning, and the consequences of the original red card remained, their suspended player unavailable for a crucial group stage fixture. The controversy had already cost one person beyond the pitch their credentials. A Paraguayan television commentator was stripped of his press accreditation by FIFA after losing his composure live on air during the Turkey match, calling FIFA's leadership and the referee thieves and accusing them of killing football. A commentator who had traveled to cover his country's World Cup campaign, watching a brand new rule change the course of a match in real time, responding the way millions of supporters at home responded, except on live television.
Now, this is where things change, because Brazil's conflict with FIFA is different from all of the others. It doesn't involve a red card or a kit or a flag. It involves language. And the way it unfolded is almost difficult to believe. During a press conference ahead of a group stage match in New Jersey, a Mexican journalist attempted to ask a question in Spanish. The moderator shut it down, telling the journalist that Spanish language interpretation was not available at the venue. Separately, one of Brazil's most prominent forwards requested that a journalist's question be delivered to him in Spanish due to difficulties interpreting the English phrasing, and event organizers allegedly refused a request. A Dutch midfielder expressed full willingness to communicate in Spanish when addressed by reporters in the language, only to be similarly instructed by FIFA officials to restrict his answers to English. Think about what was happening here. A tournament being co-hosted by Mexico, a Spanish-speaking nation, a tournament attended by millions of fans from across Latin America, a tournament featuring players from Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Mexico, and every Spanish-speaking nation in world football, and at official press conferences, players were being told they couldn't answer in Spanish. Spanish is one of FIFA's 7 official languages, alongside English, French, German, Arabic, Portuguese, and Russian, as established by amendments to FIFA's own statutes in 2022. FIFA's own statutes. The organization had voted to make Spanish an official language 4 years earlier and then failed to provide Spanish translation at press conferences during its own tournament. One prominent football journalist summarized the situation by saying, "The 2026 World Cup calls for diversity, yet at the press conferences involving some of the tournament's biggest squads, questions in Spanish, the official language of the host country and spoken by millions in North America, were not even permitted," calling it incomprehensible. The backlash was immediate and global. Following the wave of online criticism, FIFA reversed its position and announced that players would now be permitted to answer media questions in Spanish, regardless of whether it serves as an official language of their native country. Media organizations confirmed that Spanish translation was added to the list of available languages, with FIFA making the change after the controversy went viral. FIFA caved within days of the tournament starting, on a policy that should never have existed in the first place, given that Spanish is one of its own official languages. So where does all of this leave things? 4 nations, 4 separate conflicts with the organization running their tournament. Iran dealing with travel documentation issues that affected their preparation for actual matches. Egypt stripped of symbols representing their greatest footballing achievements before they even kicked a ball. Paraguay watching their player suspended under a new rule, while a comparable incident involving another player went unpunished 4 days later. And Brazil, connected to a press conference situation so obviously wrong that FIFA reversed course within a week. The best-case scenario from here is that the football itself takes over the story. As the group stage closes and the knockout rounds begin, the immediate texture of each day becomes about results, tactics, and moments on the pitch. FIFA has already reversed the Spanish language policy. The Paraguay complaint is under investigation. Iran has lodged its formal objection and continues to play. Egypt modified its kit and got on with competing. The tournament continues. The more complicated scenario is that each of these situations becomes a thread that analysts and football federations pull on when the tournament ends, building a comprehensive picture of a governing body that made avoidable errors across multiple areas in the same fortnight, and asking what accountability looks like when the tournament is over and the next one is already being planned. What do you think? Which of these 4 situations do you believe FIFA handled worst? And do you think the formal complaints from Iran and Paraguay will actually produce any meaningful outcome once a tournament is finished? Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you want to keep following this tournament's off-pitch stories, and share this with any football fan who needs to hear all 4 sides of what has been happening at the 2026 World Cup.